Wow, that's impressive, how quiet it all went. Um, that's quite something. I haven't witnessed this before, I'm a bit shocked. Just want to say welcome, everybody. My name's Nick Rhodes. I'm the Programme Director for Product Ceramic Industrial Design. And I just want to thank you all for coming along to this celebration of 20 years, roughly, of the agenda of women into product design. Now, I recognise quite a lot of faces. Good to see you folks back. I'm going to say a few words of introduction, then I'm going to hand over to Betty, and she'll introduce the panel, tell you about what the order of events is tonight. So the theme is that this is a celebration. Since, well, the project sort of started in '95, I think, to bring more women into products and industrial design as a discipline, to balance and make a better gender balance. And it's quite a unique thing I think we have in the UK now, because in product design, the BA course, we're at parity, roughly 50-50 in the course, men and women, male and female. And that's unusual in the UK today, still. So the achievement is a good one. It doesn't mean there isn't work to do, however. Lots of things have changed in this last 20 years, and unfortunately quite a few things haven't. So these are amongst some of the topics I think we'll be discussing. Loads of people to thank for this evening. Of course, our panelists, who will be introduced shortly, and we can do some more thanks at the end, but we're all eternally grateful. These fine folk here, who are current members of staff and have been active in the course and have had a part in the project since its beginning. And also those who have organised the event. I'd like to say thanks to Carla Sorrell, Ella Bully, and of course Betty Marenko as well, for making the event happen. When this agenda started, we had something like 35% of the population of product design were female, which was an unusually high percentage. However, we weren't getting near 50%. And if I think back to my own education, which was a little while before then, as an MA student in industrial design at the Central School, as it was then, I think there was one woman in the entire cohort of students in studying industrial design. And in fact, in my undergraduate studies, which was even a larger population, there were none. Now, there are lots of reasons why this might be the case, but nonetheless, there has been progress made, and this is a really important thing to bear in mind. Some other thanks to offer to the then head of college, Margaret Buck, and Malcolm Johnson, who was also a mover in this project as course leader of product design at the time. But I would like to finish off by making a tribute to one member of staff at the time who was highly instrumental and highly involved in the project and is not with us today. Janet Boys died tragically young. She was first year tutor. She was 51 in '98, and she was a great loss to us. And it's very sad to reflect that she didn't see the fruits of this project, because she was very intimately involved. So I'm going to hand over. We'll have a little summary at the end of the session and think about what we might want to do to move forward. But maybe you can join me now with an advanced round of applause and thanks to all the participants for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Can you all hear me? Yes? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and especially all you students out there. It's nice to see you. My name is Betty Marenko. I run the Contextual Studies program for product design, and I'm going to be chairing this evening conversation, because this is what we're going to have, a conversation. I decided to structure the evening in this way. We're going to start by casting our eyes back and look at the landscape of the product design course as it was in the mid-90s, late 90s, when, as Nick mentioned, a number of initiatives were put in place to recruit female students, basically, to make the course more attractive to female students. And as we can see, those initiatives were incredibly successful because we now have a 50-50 representation across our student cohort. And actually, some year, if I'm not mistaken, we have more female students than men. So, great success. So to put today's reality in perspective, we're going to hear from our three first guests who were all in different ways instrumental to put those initiatives into fruition and to act and to make positive change in the course. And they have interesting direct insight on what was it like then and what worked and what perhaps didn't work. And then we're going to have 5 female graduates from the product design course, 5 alumni, who graduated across a span of years from 96 to last year. So they will be able to, all together, guest alumni, to share their stories, their experiences, their insight, and also reflection on their challenges they might have encountered being women and designers, students, and then launching themselves into the industry as a freelancer or working in firms and in education and research as well. So a huge variety of input in the conversation that we're going to have. Now, before I introduce our first 3 guests, getting there almost, let me tell you why we're doing this now. Yes, I agree with Nick, we have a lot to celebrate. And to see our student cohort right now is a terrific achievement, and we should be incredibly proud of that. And this, of course, is also reflected in a lot of other design courses across Europe, across North America, where there are more female students than men, most often. But, as the Design Council report for 2018 indicates, in the UK, the design workforce is mostly male. And here is where the number starts not to add up. We have a 78% of the workforce in the design sector male. And unfortunately, the data for 2018 are exactly the same of the data from 2015. So 3 years ago, nothing has changed, 78%. Even more concerning is that within the subsector, according to the Design Council, the subsector of product and industrial design, the percentage of employed male reaches 95%. They're quite alarming figure, especially considering that 63% of the population, the student population, is female in design courses. So the first question that perhaps we would like to unpack throughout the evening is, where all these talented, ambitious, bright female graduates in design go? So yes, there is a lot that remain to be discussed and addressed and just brought into the open, as we're doing tonight, and as I hope we're going to be able to do more in the future, in terms of visibility, representation, and open discussion. And it seems to me that it's quite significant we're doing this right now, in 2018. It's a year that's been so far quite pivotal in terms of debates on gender inequality, the visibility and impact of the Me Too movement, for instance, and even rising awareness about what is gender, and gender fluidity conversation. So an interrogation on what gender is in the first place. And of course, again, to put things in an historical perspective, is also 100 years since women, or some women in this country, gained the right to vote. So it's important to have the historical perspective. It feels then it's the right time to start with that historical perspective. And I'm going to be introducing our first 3 guests. We have Lorraine Gamman. Hi, Lorraine. Lorraine is Professor of Design here at Centro San Martin and Director of Design Against Crime Research Center, which has won multiple awards for its work on social responsive design and has been pivotal in addressing social issues through design practice. And Lorraine has also written extensively not only about social design and the impact of design and social innovation, but on gender design and representation. Lorraine has taught contextual studies across a range of academic schools, including Centro San Martin, Goldsmith, etc., for 25 years. In fact, I'm doing the job that she used to be doing. Jackie Piper. Jackie Piper is a designer, co-founder of a British color standard company. She worked in the creative industry for a number of years for companies such as Polaroid, Panasonic, and Matteo Sound Studio. And I think there are interesting experiences to be shared about that too. Before founding W2 Whitbread, producing contemporary collection for the home and gift market, sold globally from Hills to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And Jackie is also one of our staff members on the product design course. Jane Penty. Hi, Jane.
Hi.
Designer, educator, and propelling force for sustainability. She's also author of the forthcoming book, Product Design and Sustainability, coming out in the spring.
Yes, definitely.
For Routledge.
Definitely.
Now, Jane was there when all those initiatives were launched. In fact, she was responsible for some of them. And Jane worked at General Electric as an engineer, and she was also the first female graduate of the RCA Industrial Design Engineering course. So she has an interesting experience to share about about what it means to be a woman designer, engineer in a world of men. So I'm going to just pass the word to Jane so she can share some of her insight about the history of what we're talking about now. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Thanks, Betty. Now, I have my props ready. Hi there, everybody. And I'm very glad to see that we've got a mixed gender audience because this problem's not going to be solved by women alone. So thank you for everybody for coming out tonight. I was given I'm going to be taking you back to 1996. But first of all, before I do that, I want to talk about the fact that what this was then, and I don't think it's very different now, that it's certainly not about lip service to gender equality. It's not about being PC. It's actually about, I'm not sure that is this? Yeah, this is my slides, okay. It's actually about, and the slide is a little bit on the fuzzy side, but these were the statistics we were working with back in 96. And from what Betty's been saying, it's even worse, but it says basically that we had 12% of product graduates are women in those days, and 10% of the products are actually designed by women. So this is really what it's about. So I was asked first of all, I want to say that part of the congratulations today about being a course that has over 50% or equal 50% women is quite extraordinary. But as I say, when I started as a lecturer, I was a studio tutor in 93, it was about 1 in 5, just to give you a sense of 1 in 4, in fact, to give you a sense of it. So in the spring, when I was asked in 96 by Malcolm Johnson to run some outreach, an outreach program, which is what I did, this is what we were up against. And the first thing we did was we'd had some staff development days where we invited teachers from DT, that's design technology courses, all over London, together with designers, all the female designers, industrial designers that we could get in together. And it was really to try to unpack why, what we could do to interest females in the subject. And some of our conclusions were that really the subject matter, we needed to think very carefully about our briefs. The subject matter, how it was presented, what its emphasis was very, very important. And our conclusions, so those were our conclusions. We also ran, I'll move on to other things, but we also ran some taster days for girls all over. And yes, we had to do everything by papers, so we'd had to send out the leaflets, get them back, collate them. Oh, if you were lucky, they might have been faxed over. So, but anyway, just to put it back into perspective. And these are some of the results. What we did certainly find in that year, as I say, was that really we had to change the way the subject was being presented. The next year, we had funding again, and this time it was only for the taster days. Sorry, these are some more of our sort of grainy pictures that I just dug up last night, in fact, but showing really, where we had a really wide cross-section of females. We did a project in a day, but it was very much about who this was for, why you would want to be doing it, and that seemed to work very well. The next year, I was asked again to run some taster days, but I had a new boss. And this new boss said, I think we really need a very strong, iconic product to put on the cover of your leaflet, unlike those other ones that we'd had before. And he suggested that this was the product to put on the cover of my thing. I thought he was joking at first, so I just sort of kind of went along with it. And then I realized that he was serious about this, dead serious about it. And I just had to kind of end the meeting by saying that I'd get back to him with some design layouts. And this is what we ended up with. And this was the product image that we had. Okay, I'll move on from that. Right, so when we went from the statistics, I mean, one of our issues was so much. We had females coming from Europe, but we had very few coming from UK. It did seem to improve, that end of things, but I would say that it's still an issue today, partly to do with how the whole subject matter is taught. So I would never claim that these outreach initiatives were by any means the only reason for the change, but they were a start, and we also owe a lot of the success of the course to the transformation of our industrial design course, as it was then, from an object-oriented, technical solutions-based into a contextually led product design course. And I have to say that we owe a lot of that to Lorraine, who's going to follow on from me. And that really was the clincher. That was what made this thing become relevant to women. They were interested in that. Of course, they'd love to have nice products, but there had to be a reason for it. It wasn't just a technical thing in itself. But before I end off, I'd just like to come back to this product. In 2002, I went on a visit to Alessi, to the factory, and I found out that it was their best seller at the time, 2002. Okay, this is their best seller. And I got in touch with Alessi last week just to find out how things were going. And they told me that this is still one of their best sellers. So while today at CSM we've reached a 50-50 gender balance on the course, our students and society at large still have to face some hard facts beyond the college walls in the big bad world of real product design. So I can only say this is work in progress, and I hope we're going to hear good things from our graduates. Thank you very much. This was a leaflet. Right.
Well, as you mentioned contextual studies as a sort of pivotal, maybe it's good for Lorraine to pick up on that.
Should we remove this, though? Or should we keep it?
Let's keep it.
I should talk about how I got my job. So I came from the Women's Press and Virago, which were feminist publishing houses, and I was very much into queer theory. And actually, for me, queer is really a much more important construct than women, because actually we need to include everybody. And so that was the first principle. And I got my job because, and I have to be quite careful what I say, somebody had been sexually harassed on the course, and they wanted a strong woman. That's how I got my job in product design. I was teaching fashion. And so what happened was that the culture of the course amazingly changed. And, there used to be waves of testosterone across the fourth floor, and it changed. And the course that we have today is nothing like the course that was reinvented. But there are problems. You know, design is the handmaiden of neoliberal economics. And actually, men are very much a part of that, a market-led tendency. And where I'm optimistic about design is that I see that with service design and social design, that women are making a difference. They are making a new way. But actually, when I look around at the women designers in the world, and I think, who has imposed their language? There are very few women product designers that I can name. There are a few women from the Bauhaus, there are a few exceptions. But, you know, Zaza Hadid actually is probably the only woman who's an architect that I can think of that has designed products for everyone, furniture, shoes, you know, chairs, tables, cars, yachts, that you would know, and you would know her style. And for me, that is part of the issue. It's part of the issue of access, and it's part of the issue of economics. But I'm incredibly hopeful. I think the course has new potential. I think that we have some really amazing young women coming through product design. I think that we've got a long way to go to change the actual world, but actually research makes a difference. And so my job, you know, all those years ago, was to try and explain how researching and contextualizing was very useful. And I'll end with the fact that context is everything. And if you don't get that right, if you don't get that contextual research right, I'll be amazed if you can design anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie, you were one of the few female members of staff that were working in the 90s. Is that correct?
That is correct. But Jane was already there, and
Yeah.
Janet. And I'm obviously now thinking that I was part of the outreach programme. But I didn't know it at the time. And, so now I'm feeling, but also, a friend had, I don't know, I'd been working in corporate design and in America, and I was quite sick of it. And I came back to the UK and I wanted a change, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I'd worked in a consultancy and I got sick of that, and I got sick of corporate. And I was talking to a friend and she said, well, why don't you get, you know, teaching, while you're thinking about what to do? I thought, well, that's a good idea. Didn't think of that. Applied for a job, wrote a letter, because there was no email, and wrote a letter to Malcolm, the then course director, with my wrong phone number on it. I didn't get that call. And I remember thinking, God damn it, why don't they? I'm corporate design consultancy, I'm gold, baby. You know, why am I not getting this call? But anyway, very sweetly, after he obviously tried to phone this wrong number several times and didn't get an answer, he wrote a letter. That then became clear why we hadn't made contact, and came into this wonderful place that was completely different to working in a consultancy or for a corporation, and meeting people like Lorraine, using very long words, opening my mind immediately, thinking I'm out of my depth quite quickly, and but also this is an incredibly special space to be a part of, and it's a funny area in between industry and reality, and I thought, oh, this is good. I want to be part of this. And then was aware of these initiatives, which I remember thinking, well, that's a good idea, because I've no idea why there aren't more women doing product design, because it's awesome. It's great. And I had no thoughts why, because it seemed to be a degree where you could do everything and anything, and this seemed to be fantastic, and I couldn't understand why there weren't more women doing it. But I think for me, part of it's education, obviously. I didn't know what the word design was the first time I heard it. I was thinking about this. I was 19, and it's when I started my foundation course that there was no design tech, there was no GCSE, people didn't use the word
You
design.
mentioned the corporate world, and I'm interested in that, especially the transition from the corporate world, maybe in the 90s, into education, and maybe it's something also that Lorraine and Jane also have experience of. How was it, the corporate world, in terms of gender balance, gender politics in design?
Ooh, well, it was a very small design department, because I went to work for Polaroid, and actually I think the only reason they were desperate, which was they were sinking, as they slowly eventually did, and I remember I'd done a student project for them, actually. It was a graduate project with them. We had, like the client project here, Polaroid was a sponsor, and I did a camera, and it won an award, and then I was offered a job, which was great. But the company was in trouble, which I found exciting, actually, because I remember thinking, good, they're going to take some risks. You know, they're going to do some interesting things. Joined, found out that wasn't going to be the case. It was just going to be this giant, heavy man pyramid with design being the smallest department. Obviously, corporate culture is an interesting thing, but they were a chemistry business, not a design-led business, so that was my mistake, thinking design was going to change everything.
In terms of the course, corporate culture dominated, and that we were very lucky that Professor Dow Russell of the Royal College of Art brought in many actual projects, over 30 years I've been here, to the product design course because she worked with business. And it was always a tension. And actually, when these initiatives were set up, the head of college, Margaret Buck, was very keen, you know, to get women in, but also to maintain the corporate balance. And that she told me I was too gender focused and that there was too much gender on the course. That actually, Anna Mir, who's a really famous designer now in Spain, who designed a fridge's vagina, was the end. I nearly got sacked over that one. At Dale and it was in MA Industrial Design. I mean, so even these initiatives were, you know, should be understood in the context of trying to put them forward in context where corporate culture dominates. And it was a massive problem, actually. But it did work, and it did change the course, largely thanks to Janet Boyce, you know, who worked with Jane and made a fabulous film that we can't find called Shaping the Future. And actually, some of the women on that course I'm still in touch with who were on the film. You know, and it's a sort of nostalgic moment because they were arguing to have their space. And I wish we could show it. We've lost it.
Maybe there are ways to find it. We can put a call out because...
if anyone's got a copy of it, we'd love to have it back, you know, but it got lost in the move. But the reality was that a lot of the women that were speaking were talking about things that we don't like to talk about. The fact that it is hard to be taken as seriously as a man. It was hard to make a difference and cope with the culture of the course. You know, even now, there is a particular culture in product design, maybe not so much at St Martin's, but across the board, that's quite troublesome. And so social design, maybe, and service design bring in different dimensions that are particularly female-focused. You know, but it's still something I think the course has struggled with and done their very best. And it's a much better course than it was 25 years ago for all those struggles.
I think it's, I mean, from what you guys are saying, it seems to me that some of the issues that were addressed 25 years ago, they're still here. We are still talking about them. And regardless of the initiatives and also the incredible achievements, some of those questions have not been properly addressed, certainly not resolved. And I think it's also our duty as people in design, educators, women and people of all genders, of course, to keep on discussing them and keep on finding platforms for this conversation to be had. It's very important also for what the designer can do and should be doing in the future. And on this note, round of applause for our three first speakers. Future. And I'm going to call, in fact, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to introduce our 5 alumni. Afroditi, Krassa, as I call you, can you please take a seat on the sofa reserved for you? Afroditi. Afroditi, Krassa, I'm going to also tell you when they graduated. 96.
I'm apparently the senior alumni.
The senior
I don't
alumni.
know if I should be proud of that, but hey.
Afroditi is hospitality designer and founder of Afroditi Krassa, an award-winning branding and interior design studio based in London. Her company portfolio spans bars, restaurants, hotels, and cinemas. And some of the most significant hospitality projects of the past decade, all places you know very well. Itzu, Dishoom, Aston Blumenthal first airport restaurant, the Perfectionist Cafe, and the redesign of the Carlton Cinema. Michiko Nitta. Hi, Michiko. Michiko graduated in 2007. She's part of the collective Burton Nitta, an interdisciplinary art and design studio collaborating with science and technology to investigate our future world and human evolution. So their work is published and exhibited internationally, from the MoMA in New York to the V&A Museum in London, and is taking design into the speculative and critical realm. Roselle, 2012. Roselle is Senior Creative Lead at Bow and Arrow, a growth consultancy, and her expertise has expanded extensively from product and packaging to graphic experience and digital design across multiple industries. So she worked with creative and strategists to create, develop, and accelerate game-changing products and service for a number of clients, including Google, Wall Street Journal, Mini, Method, Cadbury's, Aviva, etc., etc. Ella Dorfman.
A good year.
Oh, yes, it was. Ella is an in-house service designer for the national charity Citizen Advice, where she applies design process to a variety of social and organizational challenges. For instance, supporting leadership in working design principle into the fabric of an organization. She has recently completed a master in social and cultural anthropology at UCL, and spent 3 months doing ethnographic fieldwork in Palermo, Sicily, investigating anti-mafia enterprise and the ethical challenges they face in trying to promote a moral economy. And Kaye Toland. Kaye graduated last year. Hi, 2017. Kaye is a designer and co-founder of Mahe Design. Her work has a strong focus on storytelling and narrative development in order to translate complex issues into narrative objects, interventions, or interactions. And these objects can be speculative, critical, or everyday. I also wanted to point out, these are all alumni, and you can see the breadth and incredible span and variety of what they're doing now. And I'm incredibly proud of being part of this course just because of that. But now we're going to talk about gender. So, okay, I have quite a terrific lineup here. I'm going to start with some general questions concerning. There is a debate also within design that concerns gender. And at the London Design Festival, there was a panel called Gender Equity in Cities, for instance. So designers and architects discussed, are cities designed for women, or are they not? And in fact, last week in New York, there was an Innovation Through Gender-Centered Design Thinking conference. So it seems to me that there is a variety of very established platforms and stakeholders coming together and discussing these things within design. So my first question will be, do you come across this conversation in your practice? I'm going to start with Afroditi because she's senior. Are these conversations, is this something that you encounter in the practice when you deal with clients? To what extent these issues sort of pop up?
Yes, we do, absolutely. First of all, internally, I run a studio where primarily female as a design studio. We've only got 2 male members of staff and 7 female members of staff, so men are outnumbered in our studio. That's by no means on purpose, it just happened to be that. But it's a bit of an exception because we are in the interior design sector, and I think the interior design sector is one of the few design sectors which are primarily female, whether we like it or not, because people assume that women can choose nice fabrics and pick up nice cushions and make things look pretty. So we get a lot of briefs where people say, oh, we just want you to make something look pretty, which annoys me massively, but that's another discussion. So internally we do discuss that because I would like our studio to be more balanced, but it's not. That's another big thing. But when it comes to clients, yes, we do, because we have to understand who the customer base is, whether it's primarily male or female, how do we speak to them, how do we attract them. And I generally, I think I operate in a gender-blind manner. I never, in my own career, noticed very much the fact that I was a minority in primarily male-run businesses. I never really took much notice, and I never paid much attention to all of that. When I graduated from Central St. Martin's in '96, I think we're only 8 female designers out of 68. Again, I didn't pay much notice on that. I just focused in what I wanted to do and really selfishly kind of got things done for myself and didn't care about anybody else, which I still do. And you know, when it comes to these discussions, I find them slightly superficial because we all fall into stereotypes very, very quickly into what's female-friendly design and what's not. And we tend to discuss and describe things as more masculine or more feminine on, I think, a very superficial level. And in the end of the day, to me, you know, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you design for women or men, it doesn't really matter, because there's no definition, in my opinion, of what's feminine-friendly design. You know, how do you define that? It's either good design or it's shit design, in my opinion. And appropriate design should be appropriate for the target market, whatever they are, and it should be right for them. And I think we should avoid this stereotype. Because, so going back to your question, sorry, I went on a big loop. Yes, we do have these discussions, but I still think they're tackled on a very, very superficial, kind of surface level, in my opinion. And I think even as designers, I don't personally feel like I've got authority in understanding, you know, the less superficial elements. And I think we're not highly educated in understanding that, because we, I think, all fall into stereotypical thinking. And as long as we challenge stereotypes, we're not changing anything. We just need to challenge stereotypes of all sorts. You know, whether, you know, gender stereotypes or non-gender biased stereotypes. I think design is about challenging things. So.
Indeed. I wanted to ask Kaye, and then I'm going to pass the words to you, Jane.
Yes, sir.
Kaye, just because you entered the profession recently, what is your impression in finding these issues addressed or brought to the surface in your recent experience in the world, in the industry of design?
So, with the co-founded company that I have now, the only time that I've really noticed this come up, and we've only been operating for 8 months, is more that we have a client. He's male and he owns a dry cleaners, and we're doing his branding and interior and packaging and stuff. He's got a shop in Haggerston. And like the only time that gender really came up was when we realized, being down there, that all of his clientele were male, almost. There was about 10 dresses hanging up, and it's all suits. And we kind of got a bit concerned, just because we weren't sure. We were kind of worried, like, are we going to make this place look too feminine? I think that's the only time it's really came up for me since working, because we know that we're a two-woman team, and we really noticed that it was a male clientele. And I think we kind of got over that in a couple of days, because we realised that it wasn't a problem. But it did come up for me in my mind that we didn't want to put his customers off, you know. But it more came up when I first graduated. I was doing a lot of work in set design, and it was all during the time in the #Me Too movement, and Harvey Weinstein and stuff like that. So obviously when I was working in set design, there was a lot of conversations about that, but it was more kind of men talking about it not being a problem, and a lot of, you can imagine what the discussions were like, and I don't really think I could be bothered getting into it right now.
So it's about the issue of the gender stereotypes, which has been mentioned, and I think this is something that we can further unpack. Jane?
No, I just wanted to quickly to Afroditi. I mean, I can understand it can all work well in the studio, and then you'll have your clients and that. What about when projects go to site? And I'm not saying that you must have that well honed and well sorted now, but I'm sure in your early days that you know, the interfaces, the site interfaces are pretty tough. and women. My experience is that women have to prove themselves.
I don't think it's just on sites. I think we just have to accept that the dominant sex, whether we like it or not, is male across the world, in every sector, in everything you do. I don't think there's many sectors where it's the other way around. I would sit in a meeting with 12 balding, middle-aged English men. I'm the only one who's female with an accent, so of course you have to work twice as hard. That goes without saying. You go on sites, of course you have bullying kind of project managers who try to push you out, and if you are a man, you have more resistance. If you're a female, you have to put twice the amount of resistance to get heard. But that's, in my opinion, across all industries, pretty much. It's a power thing. As women, we have to try twice as hard to shift the balance of power to come our way rather than the other way, and that's not an easy task. And that's why I think we're talking about graduates, which is fantastic that the course has changed. Yet at the same time, how many design agencies are run by women across the world? Yeah. Very, very few. We all have the same problem of trying to come up with strong female creatives across the world who left a legacy. And apart from Zaha Hadid, I think you're absolutely right. And perhaps Eileen Gray in the 1930s, or very few names, have created a brand for themselves. There are fundamental reasons why this is happening. And I do agree things have changed. They're changed by approximately 2% out of what they should be changing. The change is extremely slow, in my opinion. And we're, these initiatives are amazing and they're making a change, obviously, but we're very far away from a world which is balanced in that sense. We have to accept that. And we as women have to live with it and work twice as hard. This is, unfortunately, my personal perspective.
Do we really have to accept that?
We don't have to accept. We don't have to not try. By accepting, I don't mean we shouldn't try and change it, but we have to be aware that this is reality. In order to be able to instigate change, you have to accept reality. You can't live in a world where you think, oh, that's not the case. Everything will be like nice and rosy. I'll deal with clients who are all female and speak the same language. It's not the case.
I mean, you touched on a very important point that doesn't have to do simply with design, but with society at large, which is what, we can define like the confidence gap, or the fact that women have to work twice as hard. They have to be way more assertive, because often for a man, I'm going to be overgeneralizing here, guys, but often for a man, work equals visibility, while a woman needs to prove that the work has value with a different standard. And what is important to say is that this is not about demonizing one gender over the other. It's important to say that some of these behaviors and some of these attitudes are tacit. They're not even conscious. They are completely normalized. And the fact that we're having a conversation is also a way to say we must think about these things. Why for a woman, regardless of whether she's a designer or not, the proving herself in her work becomes twice as hard. Why is that so? Especially when you then consider also practical, tangible matters such as the gender pay gap. Has anyone experienced that? Oh, you don't know?
I was going to say.
Yes.
We're probably not aware.
Ella, I wanted to ask about your experience in Italy, actually. Because you did 3 months' work in Sicily as an investigative designer, in a sense. How was that?
It was great fun, and it is interesting experiencing a different culture in Italy, and particularly in the south. There is people are battling with kind of old and the new, strong Christian religious upbringings and family values and family meals together, and all very much kind of lots of positives in there that people are wanting to hold on to, and kind of people my age, I'm 26, out there wanting to work out how can they hold on to that, but at the same time they want to travel and they want a career and they want to be bisexual and do all of that stuff together, and so that is an interesting dimension. And I didn't realise until I went to Palermo, how different people can think even within Europe. So I never thought. I had someone 24 say, "Oh no, I'm pro-divorce." Reassuring me that they're pro-divorce, and it never even occurred to me that someone in their a European in their 20s would ever think to need to say that. And so I suppose I've been thinking about this event, and probably a lot of my stories, I have to say, are kind of feeling privileged and feeling lucky to have strong females in my life and having kind of opportunities that lots of other people in other countries don't.
Sure.
So I just got back from India, and that we're talking about design for the 1 or the 10%. The reality of product design is up until 1980, it had a broader remit about use, value, and change. Now we do consumer products. And like being in India and looking at the rape statistics, which are depressing, and the products that have been generated to respond to the rape. I don't want to live in a world where I have to wear a shirt that gives somebody electric shock, or I have to put in a condom in case I'm raped on the way home. But a lot of women, actually in the world, a very considerable amount of them, experience gender issues in quite a profound and difficult way. So my point in raising this is that, we're talking about, a privileged group of people who are trying to be treated equally. And if we can't be treated equally, how can we, imagine that we can go to other countries and share our knowledge? And it strikes me that some of the struggles that we have to have are about, like, how to change things. Right, it's about transformation design, and that's not brand and market. It's not even, which is level 1. It's not even service design, which is level 2, or sense making. We're talking about transformation design. And for me, the gender and the queer issues, which is about people, like hate crime is up in Britain. People are being sort of smacked on the street for looking different, in terms of their gender identities. Like, we're very privileged to be speaking in this way in product. And my issue is about the narrowness of the conceptualisation of gender. Sex is between your legs, but what's between your ears is profound. And that we need to actually come up with a design that can address more people in much more democratic ways, not only in Britain, but across the world. So for me, the gender debate is a very serious debate. So.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask something to Roselle, because in your role with Bow and Arrow, you also work with the big tech company like Google. And some of these companies don't have a very good record on gender politics and gender balance. And I'm just wondering if you had anything to share in particular about your experience of working with them as clients.
Before I start, I realized I don't have a mic.
Oh,
Thank you. I think it varies a lot across different brands and companies, and also different clients. So I have been in situations where I've been in a workshop with 20 male, and it's quite intimidating. But also having worked with clients who are women in Google, they're all really smart people. So I think in terms of politics and gender politics within the company, I didn't experience that aspect with that specific brand. But there are definitely lots of old-fashioned politic issues with big corporate companies. And having been in those kind of workshops and working relationships with them, there are definitely loads of passive behaviors that people don't recognize. So to give a tangible example, you would be in a meeting with your colleagues, and they might be male, they might be female. You would see the client looking and giving eye contact to your male colleagues, but not really listening to you actively. And I think it's definitely they probably don't do it intentionally. But they're also completely unaware of this behavior and how it impacts your relationships and how you work together.
is this something that anyone else sitting here has experienced? This sort of being bypassed or not listened attentively because you're a woman and someone else says more important thing than you?
Yeah, when I was working in set design, I was in kind of a large team, and there was plenty of people above me and plenty of people below me, but always any of the men working below me would have been treated as if they were working above me, and actually a lot of the times they would have treated me as if I was there to assist them. And that's one of the reasons I got out of that industry, because that was really supported by everybody as well. If you had an issue with it, everybody just wanted you to stop complaining about that issue and shut up about it. But that's my experience. And actually, just a side note for another talk, but my partner, she's from Taiwan, and when we're having meetings, people direct all of their attention to me, and that's a race thing as well. But when we're here, I've really noticed it. I didn't notice it in the beginning until we went to Ireland, where it's a lot more extreme, obviously, because we have far less races. But like I really noticed then that like people were just not looking at her in the eye, and yeah, like an extra layer of issues there.
Absolutely.
I had it with Panasonic when I was an intern in Japan, and it turned out there was no female dormitory accommodation near the factory. So it was about 30 miles away, and that's because they'd never had anybody want to work in the television division that was female. So I had this ungodly commute, which was 2 buses and 2 trains to get to friggin' work every day, which made it a lot harder. But I remember thinking, I can see why people don't want to work for you.
I mean, I guess the positive thing was that you were a pioneer.
I felt like a pioneer, but it was bloody hard work, and I also felt like I couldn't give up either, and there was no point in complaining because that's just how it was. But I thought, right, I'm going to do this, if it kills me, and it was really hard. But I mean, I'm hoping it's changed. If anyone's got any intel on that, that would be lovely to know. I mean, it must have, surely, but I mean, maybe not.
I think also you need to, I agree with that, but you also need to look into company culture, and that's very important beyond, professional kind of etiquette and attending meetings and whatever. There's also company culture that is, well, at least in my experience, tends to be quite, kind of old boys schools, especially when it comes to design studios. I was the first female employee at Simo Powell, which was the kind of hotbed of creativity back in the 90s, I guess. And it was 40 designers, all male, and we would go out and it would be all about lager, smoking, motorbikes, girls, which was fine by me because I liked all of the above, so it's fine. I could work with all of that. But it wasn't very inclusive in that sense, in a social sense. It wasn't an inclusive environment for anybody who didn't fit with this, like, let's get drunk, drive motorbikes, smoke all night, and I don't know, shoot air guns or whatever it was. And it seemed very attractive from the outside, but when I joined, and although I really enjoyed my time there, I left thinking, God, how can we expect more of the graduates to be employed by a company like that? It's really off-putting to a lot of female employees. And going back to I want to give you this interesting anecdote about pay gap. I attended this lecture a couple of years by Calatrava, the architect, world-renowned architect, highly respected in the Design Museum. And he was asked whether there's a pay gap between female and male in his own practice. And his answer went on for about half an hour. And it started with the fact that he said that it was great that he had 2 female students when he studied architecture, and there were only 2. But he was grateful there were 2 because they made the place look pretty. Then went on to say that he's very grateful that his wife has been part of his team for so long because she's archiving all his material for when he dies. And that's her role, to effectively archive all his great work. And then when he was prompted again to answer the question, he refused to answer what he pays male and female, and ended up giving a sketch as a donation to the Design Museum, which showed 3 naked women, one behind the other, which made everybody walk out of the lecture immediately, especially all female. And it just, epitomizes the attitude that architects, especially the world of architecture, I think is the worst. you know, these male, big male kind of orientated architecture studios. Calatrava is, you know, a kind of hero for architects across the world. And to attend a lecture where he admitted to all of the above, it was absolutely shocking.
But for me,
and disgusting.
Sorry, but it's true, and I completely support that. But having worked, you know, with the police and also in prison with male offenders, and you know, there is obviously a patriarchal culture, but there's also a class-based culture. And for me, class and race actually have, you know, a real dimension about power and agency as much as gender. And so, you know, the women might not be paid very much, but the working class people like opening the doors, and the black people in there doing the same sort of thing at lower rates. It's a massive problem. So we have an issue with power and agency. So what are we going to do about it? My thing is, we can moan, but actually, personally, I chose to move out of market-led design and to try and make a difference. And you know, I'm not sure how much difference I've actually made, but the reality is that there is real autonomy in different spaces. And in my lifetime, you know, I set up product design because I hated the new course director, whose name will remain not spoken, in 1999, right? And so I went in the cupboard at the back of the studio and refused to come out, really, until I'd invented design against crime. And, you know, in that space, it was really interesting to see how social issues in 1996, 97, 98 were not part of product design culture. And now, you know, I was very, very unpopular, and I find that the things I teach now people read, it's amazing. Like, it's 20 years later, it's actually 30 years, but no one's counting. And the reality is that a lot of students, a lot of product designers, a lot of women want to address social issues, and I think that's amazing. It's an amazing positive. So what are we going to do about the gender divide? So we can do our best to demand equal rights. I'm a member of the Women's Party, which is not doing so well, but actually we can do our political vote. But internally we can do stuff too. And actually a lot of people don't speak up. And I am known for being outspoken, and I don't care anymore. I think sack me and I'll take you to court, yeah? So like, basically, I have the opinion that a lot of women here, particularly on product design, have something to say. And we need to hear what you want to say. We need to hear about the teaching. We need to hear about whether this works for you. And if it doesn't, you need to tell us, because then we can change it. Those of us, including me, who are in a position to change it, will change it. But you have to speak up as well. Like, we can moan about the pay gap, and there is a massive pay gap. But actually, we need to do something about it.
So it's interesting, Betty, that you said in the introduction, where have they all gone, these female leaders? And I think with that discussion, there's so many answers to that, but it's really important to remember how work and personal lives are not two separate spheres. And, I was actually 2 months premature, and this shocked my head teacher and mother, who said to the doctor, "What? No, I can't. I've got meetings in." And she left me and went into work the next day. She assures me just to cancel the meetings, not to do it. And I think that actually kind of sets the trajectory. That's very emblematic of how I've been brought up in terms of my attitude to work as a woman. And there are compromises that need to be made and decisions that need to be made in your life as a woman, and now more and more as a man. So, you know, if we don't get paternity right, paternity right, we don't solve this problem.
And also to go back to what Afroditi was saying, the culture that a studio culture or agency culture that demands very long hours, especially you know when you're close to deadline, really has an impact if you have small children to look after. So there you have immediately a choice, because that question, how do you balance your family and work, is never asked to a man. We always get that question asked, right? And it's a very difficult balance, but these are also things that, Lorraine, I completely agree with you, we have to speak up, and these things have to be brought into the open. I was just reading the new book written by Alice Roston, a design critic. A new book just published a few months ago is called The Design as an Attitude, which I think is a brilliant title. She has a chapter in which she looks at the relationship between gender politics and design, And what she writes is that, according to her, design is still a boys' club, and the gender politics within design are, and I quote, archaic. So, and this is just published, which it's a bit disheartening because she's an expert and she knows exactly what she's talking about, and she has a very, interesting long-span view of the industry. So, if this is the situation now, what are the next steps? Do we need what is called positive discrimination? Do we need more role models? Do we need more female into positions? Do we need more female onto female mentoring? Jane, you wanted to say something?
Well, yeah, it will connect with this. I promise. But thinking about getting back to the nitty-gritty of what goes on in studios and studio culture, during the years when I freelanced and I went into various different studios, which gave me a real chance to reflect on what happened and what worked, what I ended up saying to myself or concluding was that when you are in a gender-balanced studio where there's a mix of both, in those situations, that is definitely where I felt most comfortable, and where I felt that my voice was heard, but it was, it was an effective team. Having said that, I never worked in a mostly female one. Mostly I was in male ones, but what I realized was that I don't think women are identical designers either. I mean, what I'm trying to say is I think that possibly one approaches things in a different way, but if you're in a male context, you're judged from the male point of view of how you've approached that thing. Okay. And therefore you are rubbished. And that really became clear to me that actually it was about we come at things in different ways, and that's why the gender mixed studios really worked, because you round out how you approach something, and the result is so much better. But I'm just saying that's the conclusion I came to, and I made my own career decisions and family decisions and all those things. But yeah, and that's so. In answer to your question, I think we need more balance. With the balance will come a mix of. And by the way, those were in studios where we had mix of female and male bosses. By the way, it wasn't, and it's particularly ones that were run by women. I thoroughly enjoyed, but but it was just the difference where if the power was all in the hands of one gender or another, I think you get an imbalance, and I think it works both ways actually. Let's be honest, and it's about how do we get a balance of power, in a sense, so that and of mutual appreciation. To be perfectly honest, but there we are.
I wanted to ask you, Michiko, about how do you find these issues expressed in the particular field that you're carved, which is speculative design, interdisciplinary between art, design, science, and tech, and with this focus on speculating on possible futures. Is the conversation on gender sort of comes in some way? How?
I'm quite lucky, probably, that I am surrounded by these amazing, talented female figures, and really strong. Like curators are always female for some reason. Like curators of MoMA, V&A, and National History Museum, they are all female we dealt with. Nelly Ben-Hayer, my friend and competitor, she's really strong, making a point of. And also like Revital Cohen, she's an amazing artist. They are all female, I like as an artist. And in art world, it's quite female dominant, and that's what I feel very comfortable. And also one of my friends, and she is a founder of a company called Normally. She runs, this is service design company, and they have amazing sheen of working only 4 days a week, because it's a 4 directors, they are all parents, and 3 male and 1 female, but they all feel a responsibility of being parents, and they're like coming back to a balance between family and personal. I really respect that they took this decision of, okay, it's not cool to just overwork. Let's just all work 4 days a week, but we are 4 directors, getting maybe less money, but who cares? It's most important thing is children for them. And I really respect their attitude. When they have a meeting with a newborn baby, always. when someone's pregnant, they bring in a newborn baby. When they can't find a child care, that's what they do. And a client, a parent, they really appreciate it because it's everyone's problem. So, and also the scientists we collaborate with are mainly female. And probably because we did collaborate with male scientists, but we felt scientists who can or want to take a risk of bringing this crazy artist into their lab are female. So they're more risk taker, I guess, of opening up and more social, I guess, to mix up all these different disciplinary. And we've been lucky to meet all these brave female figure who is running. And all of these people I mentioned, they are running a lab or a business on their own.
And certainly the suggestion of having a 4-day working week, we can put it on our list of actionable tasks for the near future. I would second that. I think it's time to open up to you guys. If you have a question, there is a mic coming around. Any question from the audience? Or any comment, any insight you want to share? Yes.
Oh, great.
Mike is coming.
Hi, Kaye and Roselle. All right, maybe an unpopular question, and it's a two-parter. If there was a panel of 23, 24-year-old freshly graduated guys sitting here, how optimistic do you think they would be about progressing the workplace, the world, with being more inclusive of female designers? And does that make you hopeful with the new generation or less hopeful? I'm done.
It's a good question, especially considering we have a lot of students within the age range sitting here. So I do hope that some of you would like to share what they think. Yes?
I mean...
hang on, wait for the mic. Do you mind? Because we are recording.
Hello?
Yes.
I don't see, maybe like with your generation, you found the struggle with being a woman in the workplace. But for me, I mean, I sat next to, how many are there? Like 5 of the same girls in my course. And I don't view them any different. 6, sorry. I don't view them any different to my male counterparts. They're here learning, likewise I am too. So, I mean, if they were to get a job in the industry, fantastic. But, you know, I don't feel that they should be discriminated against. And if we do go into work, like, brilliant. Like.
Do you think then that effectively in education is like a safe haven? Is that?
Yeah.
And it all changes when you leave?
I mean, yeah. I mean, in education, it probably is like a safe haven because we're all here together, we're all learning together. And I'm sure when it goes into the workplace, it probably will be quite a lot different. But I would like to hope that it's as equal as it is in education.
Well, you know you'd be lynched if you said something different.
So it's question at the front.
Thank you.
Okay, can you pass the mic over over here? To Marie-Claire?
I don't know if... Oh, sorry. I don't know if it's an answer, but actually I already experienced it with some teacher in my old school.
Where are we?
I really feel like some teachers are still old school in a way. I was working in a team with 3 other guys, and I was the only female. And when we show our work at the end, I did all the technical parts of this work, and they just assumed that the guys did that, and I just did the pretty work. So, and then when I tried to explain, they don't really believe me. So I got really hurt, and I just realized. Sorry, I just realized how it could be hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Which course are you on?
Industrial design, but it was not in this school, it was in my previous country.
Okay, good. There's another. Okay, can you pass the microphone to Marie-Claire in the front row?
Possibly another way of looking at the question as a 24-year-old person trying to get into product design who's just graduated with a whole cohort of guys. If I can dare try and speak for them, I think they would have been similar to you back there, of very supportive, very encouraging, and I know as a group, we all did really respect each other's work. I think possibly you could rephrase that question of, in 8 years' time, would those guys be comfortable making possibly huge sacrifices for the sake of being a parent? Had they considered that? And then maybe if you asked the same bunch of women, had they considered that? I think that's when you could start seeing some really interesting insights and some differences.
Yeah. Plus, it's easy to be optimistic when you're in university. It's like, yeah, we're all the same, and then you get into the workplace and you're competing, and I'm privileged, and I know that I don't even notice when I'm banking on my privilege for just being white, like what I've noticed working with Amber. And it's like, I think the thing is that it's about trying to stay active and awake the whole way through your career, because if you get handed an extra slice of pie, you're going to take that, and you don't really think about who it's getting taken away from.
Hi, I'm Amber.
That's Amber.
Hey, Amber. When I look back to the classmates that are male in my year, I think we all struggled equally, regardless of gender. But I think I had a personal experience that I find it kind of sad. But I was working on getting the graduate entrepreneur visa in June this year with the help of Kaye, and with a lot of effort and time, I got the visa. And the first thing I did was to tell my best friends, my family, that I'm not getting deported, and everyone's really happy. But then one of my friends, who was male, I don't know, I guess he was struggling in his own life and stuff, but he just said that, well, I guess it's just because you're a female, that's why you got to have this visa, because they chose you because you're just an Asian female in comparison to me, a white man. And I felt kind of like, why would you say that? Like, I don't know, like maybe there is this kind of notion that's still going on, and it is weird by men, but it's only when things like this happen, they will acknowledge it and say that, oh, because you're a female, you're Asian, therefore you get to have extra points.
The loss of privilege is complicated for people, but what happened here in the history of Central St Martin's and product design is that when we started to teach the gender focus, which was queer, so it wasn't about women and it wasn't about men, it was about what is sexuality, what is man. But what happened is a lot of the guys came out, actually, and a lot of the men were repressed by other men. And I can't say the course is perfect, but there was a change, and it was remarkable, actually. And so I think that the studios operate often as a de-risk space. And by that I mean that, what happens inside the studio is often much better than what happens when you go out. And that I think that, we fight hard to make that right. But people do have to go out, and the differences are very clear. That you have to try harder if you're female to prove that you're good. And that's actually a problem. But it's not a problem of Central St Martin's, it's a problem of patriarchy. So I think so what can we do? I suppose we can challenge those areas that are, like the design museum that has a particular old-fashioned ethos about what, and it's changing, but some of the contributors seem to me to be of the old school. And I suppose we can look for those new areas where we can make a difference and choose them.
There is another question over there. Yeah, maybe you want to pass the mic a few rows back. I mean, what you're raising here is also the issue of tokenism.
Yeah.
We don't want a discussion like this to be a box-ticking exercise, or we done the female event. We wanted this to continue the conversation. Over to you.
This is a point rather than a question. I'm much further down in the education ladder in secondary education.
Yes.
And actually what needs to happen is, what's happening here needs to be taken down to the bottom, because our girls don't have a sense of entitlement. I'm a female, 30 years teaching product design, but it's still the case that they are the minority. They are my best students quite often, but they are the minority. And they're the minority because their parents don't think that they can do it. They don't give it enough credit. And the only side of design that gets the real credit from parents in a fairly normal secondary school is if you want to be an architect. Lo and behold, they even get close to that because they have no idea about the gender imbalances with architecture. But we need to bring this debate into school, much lower down, and we have to give these girls and the boys to some extent, a lot of them, and a sense of entitlement, a sense of belief that actually, if they come to somewhere like Central St Martin's, they will not be attacked genderly. They will be treated just the same as others. They won't be seen as lesser citizens. And I think that's the way to move forward, is that you people have to come into education at a lower level and convince people that actually product design and design in general is something that everybody should have an entitlement to, but particularly females, because they are definitely a minority.
Which, of course, is sort of taking us back to the beginning, to the outreach initiatives. So we're going to be doing more of those.
Yeah, hi. I'm an architect, and actually have been working as an architect for the last 4 years. And at the moment I passed for being an intern to being an architect was a slap in the face. And they didn't prepare me in the school. Like, my role in the office, I was in the same office. It changed completely. And they gave me the opportunity to work in a competition, and I have 2 interns that were working for me, and one of them was male. And every time we were having the conversation with the engineers, they were never replying to me. They were always replying to the intern, and I couldn't understand it. And things like, they didn't prepare me in school, and I somehow was I'm failing, I was not understanding what was happening, because for me this reality was not existing before coming into the working profession. It wasn't there.
When I was in India, the bill was always given to my male colleagues, even though I was paying. In fact, it was my budget. And actually, the NID student who went into prison to interview the rapist shared with me that a lot of the guys said, well, they didn't understand the problem because they'd offered to marry the women. We're talking about really hardcore patriarchal beliefs that we have to challenge, and we can only do that through education. And design is part of education. We can demonstrate, through what we deliver, what the issues are. So.
Can I just add to that point? I feel very passionate about educating people at a younger age. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to pursue a creative industry career. And about time when I was picking picking product design that I was going to go into, and I told one of my friends who was an engineer, and he was studying in Cambridge at the time. He asked me about what subject I wanted to choose, and I said product design because I just love all things creative, and I want to do something that is useful and actually solve problems. And he then turned to my friend who was next to me and asked her the same question, and she said she's going to become a lawyer. And his response was, oh good, a real professional. And that pissed me off so much, but it just fueled my passion to prove to him that he's wrong and how disrespectful he was. But actually, the root of the problem isn't about him like valuing a career over the other, I think are the root of the problem, and particularly enhanced by the cultural aspects of growing up in Hong Kong and people respecting careers in a different sense. The problem is that they don't really understand the value of design and how that can change the world and improve things. And so I think education at a younger age is a super important issue, and we should all push for that more.
Any more questions? Yes?
I just wanted to touch on a point that I saw recently. There's the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Muhammad Yunus. He has this initiative where he does microfinance for small, medium enterprises, and 97% of the people who he engages were women. And the result of that empowered people in the millions, hence why I'm sure he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So, I mean, a question from me, actually, is when having discussions about things gender-related or things equality-related, is it more important to have a bottom-up approach, touching actually the people who are most affected by the discourse, such as women? Like, I mean, Lorraine has touched on the point of rape in India, which is a very sensitive point. But the question then is, should we take a technocratic approach, a top-down approach, or a bottom-up approach, particularly with the people most affected by the discussion?
It's a really good point. Bottom up or top down?
So I just kind of want to break that as a question, because I actually get that a lot when men challenge me about my feminist values. They say, yeah, but you're so privileged, and I am the first to admit that. But my rights as a woman don't come, at the cost of someone's rights as a woman in India. And so I think, and you maybe touched on it slightly earlier, that you have to do both together, and actually how can you fight for rights for women who aren't allowed to ride bicycles or who are getting stoned? How can you fight for those rights if you can't sort of stand up and feel like you're giving yourself a fair chance at the same time?
I think the Ashoka initiatives, which are about empowering women through money, are really important. And actually, in this institution, one of the reasons I'm sitting here now, because I was incredibly badly treated by the head of college, who was in fact a woman, was because I got my own money. And what I realised is one of the ways to be autonomous is to figure out what's available to enable you to have independence. And, luckily at the time it was very difficult for me. I discovered research funding, and I made sure I got it, and I learned how to do that. And I think for women in those villages that get the small grants, that start them up, it's amazingly empowering. And that actually we need to teach sort of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship as part of the course. And I hear that might change in future, and there's new things coming, so I'm very pleased about that.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
Yeah, so, I guess I have felt that kind of lesser obvious lack of respect in my year. It's very subtle, but it is there, and I bet a lot of people in this room have felt the same, kind of not super obvious, but it's not completely there for women in product design and not being taken seriously enough. And so I was just wondering, for getting into the field and kind of dealing with this, how would you guys suggest proving to yourself, not completely proving to yourself, but proving to others and showing that you can step up to the game? What have you guys done in that sense?
I love design activism. I think the design of the Pink Pussy hat in America has made a massive difference about mobilising women. I think that I was thrilled to see it in the Design Awards at the Design Museum, and I was surprised. I was also thrilled to see that about 30% of the designs that got listed were crowdfunded, they were social enterprises, they were startups, and had different mechanisms. I think that make your voices heard about your experiences. There is no reason not to hear. I will say about the college, with all our difficulties, and there are difficulties, you can still speak out. Don't be quiet.
I think as well, trying to find the right space. I can't speak on long-term being out of uni. I've only had a couple of experiences, but I had an interview in IDEO about halfway through third year, and They were really complimentary and really interested, but they kept telling me how well suited I would be to the research team. And I kept saying, you know, like, I know my research is good. That's why I'm doing social, critical stuff. But I really want to design. Like, the research is just what you do, but I want to do the design. And they just really were really pushy about that. And it made me feel really uncomfortable. But, you know, I felt so privileged to even be asked to come down. And I kind of felt like, you know, it'd be really stupid to not just be like, oh my God, yes, I'll do whatever you want. And then I met up with a previous student who was my graduate teaching assistant, and I told her about the experience, and she chose to go into design because it's what she wanted to do. But she said that this was very normal in the industry, and in her department, you know, the women are really pigeonholed into research, and, you know, even though they're a collaborative department and they kind of cross over between research and product, the women are shut down all the time. And she was just like, you know, it's going to feel stupid now to pass up on this opportunity and to not try and get that. But it will be better for your confidence to walk away and try and find somewhere else. So there's not really much you can do to prepare and give yourself confidence. You shouldn't be trying to prove yourself to anyone. But, you know, if you're in a position where you can navigate where you want to be, it's kind of worth holding back. If you're in a situation like that where I felt really uncomfortable and I kind of knew that, because that's what really puts your confidence down, is when people push you somewhere and you kind of go there because you don't know what to do, and then you never really get to live up to what you wanted to do in the beginning. So that's like one thing, maybe, to protect yourself.
Very good point. One very, very last, and then I pass over to Nitta, over there. Mike? Up in the corner, please. What is the mic? It's coming.
So I just...
Oh, okay. Quick, and then we can hear from you at the back.
Okay, so I just view research about in China. So it's about the gender in the user experience design industry, and it showed there is already over 50% of women in the industry, and there is about 40% managers are women. So do you think it's the gender problem in the industry is caused by the culture, but not mainly about it's mainly about the culture? How do you think about that?
Those are really interesting figures.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing those.
Can I just ask you back just before we go on? Are you saying that there's still a problem despite the fact that there's 40% women in managerial positions and whatever it is, 50-50?
Do you think the gender problem in the industry is mainly caused by the culture, but not caused by the education?
I think he's asking geographically, like...
Yeah, but I'm not getting whether what he's saying is that there's still a number there, there's still an issue there or not. Or do you think that it's actually fine there? That's good.
I'm not sure if there is an issue, but I just get the percentage. Yeah. About 40% of members are female, and there are about over 50% of people in the industry is female.
Thank you. Can you just pass the microphone at the very back, and then we're going to round it up. Thank you.
I don't want to instigate a witch hunt, but I think confession is probably one of the initial points of reparation. I was wondering how the male tutors on our course felt they'd been positively discriminated against. Just to elucidate some of the potholes.
Can you repeat the question so that I missed the beginning?
I was just wondering how the male tutors on our course
product
felt,
designer.
Yeah, product designer. BAPD, MA. Felt they'd been positively discriminated against. So in what way?
In which way?
No, I mean just how they've been benefited by the discrimination we've been talking about. Just to elucidate some of the potholes that we can avoid.
It's a really good point, because I'm just going to pass the mic to Nick.
Tell us how great your career's been, Nick.
So we're going to have the concluding remarks, and then we can reconvene to the bar.
Well, thanks for that. Cheers. I think it's quite difficult. I'm not going to comment directly on that, other than to say one of the issues that we do face is we can't see. It's difficult to see our own experiences through the eyes of others because we've lived what we've lived. And so being truly objective about where we are, the conditions of us individually, from a gender perspective, from an ethnic perspective, are all very, very complex and interlinked. And I don't think I'm in a position to make a value judgment in terms of that particular question. I might come back one day when I've got some stats and give you some specifics on it. So sorry about that. But what I am going to do...
There are some statistics. He's asking about positive discrimination. The answer to the question
Well,
is look at the employment, look at the ratio of men to women who are in full-time jobs. That should tell you quite a lot.
Yeah, how many women are in the product design course teaching full-time?
Teaching full-time. Well, we work on it in product design, yeah. Well, I was going to come on to actions, actually, because we do have... I'm not going to defend where we are, but what I am going to speak to is our intention, which is a designery approach. Now, the first thing I want to say is that it's really important for us to continue to celebrate and point to examples of good practice. Yeah, and that we have a panel that we have here tonight is a really, really good example of that. That we've had the sort of questions that we've had from the audience are really, really good. Now, we've already started collecting oral histories. We want to hear the stories of our female graduates and to see if there are any themes or ideas that are coming through that will help us improve what we do here. Now, we've already conducted, I think, something in the region of 15 to 20 interviews with graduates. I think some of you here have contributed to that. I'd like to hear more, and I'd like to hear more from students who are currently present here. And by the way, this is how you get in contact with us. That's there for a reason, and please feel free to use it. I'm not going to distract from that particular comment. We do need a greater female representation in our teaching group. Actually, full-time or otherwise, I'm not sure is particularly the issue. In fact, what we're finding generally is that fractional or visiting tutors are much more available to us than full-timers. And that might be something to do with the way that people's lives are set up at the moment. Also, we would like to have a more diverse ethnic balance in the teaching team. And we're working towards a revisiting of curriculum that is a bit more reflective of this sort of diversity as well. We have a set of active engagements in MA Industrial Design, which is looking at the canon from a gender perspective and from an ethnicity agenda. So those MA Industrial Design students here from the last year or two will recognise that what we're looking for is for them to identify practitioners who are female, non-Western, ideally, that they can bring to us for us all to learn about and to discuss, so that we can broaden out the agenda. It's not the only answer, there are others. And I know the rest of the team are certainly open to other suggestions too. We need a broadening in general. But one of the things that I will also that I've learned from this evening is that, the need to speak up generally, to have your voice heard, to make a mark, to be forthcoming, are watchword ideas that are relevant for all of us and the sorts of things that we want to work towards. So I would like to think that our generational shifts are interesting. I think there's some interesting points that have come up there. I think the need for agencies to wake up to diversity as well. We still have significant issues there. Are a matter of everyone, for everyone. The idea of being a parent is a matter for us all, for society, and trying to set up business in such a way that it is more supportive are also good things that we need to be looking at. Alongside this, I would also question the structure of the university per se, not just this one, universities in general, and to understand whether they're serving a more diverse group needs in the way that it could. Loads of questions, and I guess that's what we're here for. I mean, one of the things that I would like to point to as things that I think we can take to be proud of is that we do have a very questioning environment here. And it's not been my experience of other institutions necessarily. It's the sort of thing that we would like to preserve and to grow into the future. And with the help of these you find folks sitting here, and you find folks sitting out there, and generations to come through Central St. Minds, we really are very serious about inviting you to take part in this particular mission. So please take note of the Twitter handle. It sounds a little facile, I know. Do stay in contact, do share your stories, and let us know good ideas as to how to move this agenda on, because this is what we will be doing. So I would like you to join me once more in thanking our panel, thanking Betty for chairing so brilliantly, and for coming along. Thank you.
To work for an inclusive employer, we will be recruiting in the coming months, so keep an eye out on the Citizens Advice website careers. Thank you.